if you work in an English-speaking environment, you probably want to come across as professional and gain more authority. So here are some words you can use to immediately boost your business English professional communication. And these tips are for both speaking and writing.
Instead of change, say modify or adjust.
Change is important in business because it usually means improving, or, here's a business word, up-leveling something. Populations, markets, the economy, technology, they're always changing. So of course, it's important that companies change too, to stay in line, to stay relevant. But change is not always the best word because change often implies a complete change, changing completely from one thing to another. For example, a company can change focus, change strategies, change manager, modify, or adjust, on the other hand, also mean change, but they imply changing it just a little bit, improving it, making it better through change. This is especially useful if you are giving negative feedback to an employee or reviewing your own work with somebody else, and you think it does need to change, but just use modify or adjust, because what you're saying is the work is great, we just need to modify or adjust a few small things and then it will be much better. It will be improved. You might want to ask someone to make some modifications or some adjustments instead of make some changes, please.
Instead of problem, say complication, issue, or matter.
No one likes problems. Your bosses don't like problems, your clients or customers don't like problems, you don't like problems, and I don't like problems. So let's use complication, issue, or matter instead. The issue is that the word problem implies that it can't be fixed. It can't be solved. There is no answer. It's a problem. We just have to suffer. We are stuck. The words complication, issue, or matter come with the idea that a solution, a fix, can be found, that it won't always be a problem. In fact, it's not a problem. It's a complication, issue, or matter because we can find a solution. There is a big difference between come to my office later to discuss the problem, woo, and come to my office later to discuss the matter. Okay, sure. Phew. Of course, it's the same if you want to tell a manager or a client about a problem that you are having. You know that you're having a problem with delivery, a problem with supply, or a problem with the budget. But you can say, there is an issue with delivery. There is a complication with supply. There is a matter with the budget. Or you can make them nouns. There's a delivery issue. There is a supply complication. There is a budget matter.
Instead of avoid, say circumvent.
When you have an issue, a complication, or a matter, you could solve it, or you could circumvent it. A more basic way to say this is to avoid something, or to get around something. These, however, imply avoiding something in a negative or maybe dubious way. Perhaps because you're just too lazy, or perhaps because you need to escape something, like registering your company in a clever way to avoid paying a lot of taxes. To circumvent also means to avoid problems, but it implies forethought, forward thinking, anticipating problems before they happen in order to avoid them, or finding a clever or positive way to overcome something. For example, we should install a strong firewall to circumvent any possible cybersecurity issues. Of course, if you're going to do something dubious, you could use circumvent to make it sound less dubious. Maybe you want to circumvent paying a lot of taxes.
Instead of not enough, say insufficient.
Yes, insufficient is still negative, like not enough, but it sounds just that bit more formal. For example, we don't have enough money. We have insufficient funds. Because the negative part of insufficient is included in the prefix, in. We do not need a negative word like don't or do not. It's not don't have enough, it's insufficient. So you see, we don't need the negative small word. Already it's sounding more positive. Also, whereas not enough just talks about quantity, how much, insufficient can talk about quantity or quality, to say something was below an acceptable standard. For example, there was insufficient evidence for a conviction. It is believed the company failed due to insufficient business strategies. So there you go, some alternative, more formal words to be more professional at work. Like and follow 4 Words for more business English and communication skills tips. See you next time.